What is going on, YouTube-averse? John Stanek from Johnny Radio here, bringing you another Viva La Vinyl classic album review. And guys, it does not get much more classic than this. The 1969 masterpiece, In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, recorded in 1969 and still to this day, one of the most influential rock albums of all time. I mean, it's lauded as being the first prog rock album, which could be possible. I guess that could be argued, but there's no doubt that it's one of the most influential. I mean, I was listening to it just the other day, and I realized that the song Epitaph, the main chord progression, reminded me very much of a portion of Echoes by Pink Floyd. And I was like, that's possible. Some cross-pollination there of that same time period, which, to me, I think Echoes was actually, a portion of that was ripped off by Andrew Lloyd Webber years later. So there's always artists taking from each other. But, I think this has stood the test of time and influenced multiple generations. I mean, even in the last, this century, Kanye West has infamously used 21st Century Schizoid Man in his big hit Power. It's also, the title track has been used in several films, most notably Children of Men. And, it just has that timeless quality, but also feels so out of time. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's just multiple genres being explored here, from rock to classical music, to jazz, to acid jazz on the opening track, which really takes you on a wild journey. Just from the get-go, you hear these kind of everyday sound effects, and then you're off to the races with this crazy song that feels like it could go totally off the rails at any point, but it never quite does. Not like Radiohead's The National Anthem, which probably also had a big influence from this album. But man, I just love that song so much. I think it's one of the greatest opening tracks of all time. There's so much to the vibe of it. Like, I love how Greg Lake's vocals are going through this effect that makes them distorted. It really goes with the whole theme of it, which lyrically was very much about the Vietnam War at the time and the mental effects that it was having, not just on the soldiers, but on really everyone at the time, which I think is why so many people related and caught on to this album very soon after it came out. It was pretty successful in the charts back in the time, and I think through the years, it's only become more and more beloved because it strikes on these big themes. Like Epitaph, for example, is, it's so heavy when you listen to the lyrics where he's like, confusion will be my epitaph and tomorrow I will be dying. And it's like, damn, man, I can relate to this somehow, even though it's like a little dark. But and even in the Court of the Crimson King, as kind of weird as the imagery is, and kind of has this whole medieval vibe with the purple piper and the yellow jester and the fire witch, it's somehow just universal. And I think, not that there's an MVP of this record, but I definitely want to give a little bit of props, or at least some time, talking about Peter Sinfield, who wrote all the lyrics for this record, even though he doesn't play any music. He was just a poet who passed away last year, rest in peace. But man, lyrics are just amazing on this album, especially that title track. And it kind of reminded me, because it's so rare for that kind of situation, especially with a full band, to have this other writer come in. It reminded me of the situation of like Bernie Taupin and Elton John on songs like Rocket Man, where he's telling this fictional story, which a lot of the songs on this album have that kind of fictional third person kind of feel to them. Also, I was reminded of Tumbleweed Connection here, another album where Taupin had all these stories. And what really impressed me about that is that, like Elton, what always blew my mind, it's like how he got the phrasing of all these lyrics to work with the way he sung. And I think you have to give extra props to Greg Lake because of that, because it's like, if you're a songwriter, you know how, the phrasing works with what you're writing. When you're using someone else's lyrics, it's that much harder, but it just seems it flows so well. The phrasing, the effortlessness with which Lake sings, and quite lovely too on the other tracks, like I Talk to the Wind, which kind of shows that they do have a softer side. Moonchild would be my least favorite on the record, and that's only because at 10 plus minutes and it takes some kind of meandering routes in the middle of the song, it's a little long in the tooth for my liking, but it's still a beautiful song, a great ballad. And you know, they showed that they really could do anything. And of course, they would show that they would continue to do anything on future albums as well. But I don't think King Crimson ever quite captured the lightning in the bottle of creativity and beauty on this record. I mean, the guitar playing by Robert Fripp is top notch. Of course, Ian MacDonald, just amazing on the Mellotron, which, you know, they took influence from a few years prior from the Moody Blues, who used it so well on Days of Future Past. And of course, the Beatles had already started using that instrument. But man, on the title track, it just has this huge sound. Of course, also the layers and layers of vocals that they overdubbed, which is truly mind-blowing to think that they only had an 8-track recorder to work with at the time. And of course, at that point, they had learned how to layer, like the Beatles did, multiple on top of those 8 tracks. But I don't know how many vocal tracks are on Court of the Crimson King, but it just sounds so huge. And I know that there was some, tape loss and stuff through the 70s and 80s, and they finally had to come back and remaster the original tapes properly. But oh my God, when you listen to it today, it just sounds humongous and amazing. And yeah, again, Ian MacDonald, amazing on not just the Mellotron, but on saxophone, on flute, other woodwind instruments. He may be the MVP of the album. Truly, all of them contributed something amazing to this record, and Michael Giles, no slouch on the drums, holding it down. 21st Century Schizoid Man, again, could have gone completely off the rails, but he keeps it all together somehow, and it's just a joy to listen to. And as dark as some of the places this album goes, it still just like brings a smile to my face knowing that music like this has been made. And I hope that more music is made in this vein. I know it's a lot more difficult now in the 21st century to, that now that we have Pro Tools and all that, but you sometimes wonder, like, I'm not even talking about AI, but as far as creatively speaking, it's like the less that you have, sometimes you can make more out of that. And I think this is absolutely living proof of that statement. And I think it's going to be one of the greatest albums of the 60s, or truly of all time, for that reason. So it's hard to say. Like, I want to give it a 10 out of 10, but I think realistically speaking, I give it a 9 out of 10, really just because Moonchild, I don't always skip it, but I'm kind of like losing interest on that track sometimes. But man, this is as close to a perfect album as you can get for what it is. It is, 42 so odd minutes of just some of the most experimental and mind-blowingly creative music you will ever hear. And that is my review. My 2 favorite songs, if you didn't notice, were the opening track and the closing track, of course. But everything in between is great. The whole thing's great. Love it. Thank you, King Crimson, for making this record, and thank you guys for watching. We got so many more album reviews here on the channel, top 5s every Friday, top 50s every month, the Great 8, so much more. Thank you for watching, and as always,